Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jason the Old Millennial here on a live stream where I'm covering my top 10 favorite movies of the 1970s, but also covering a lot of other honorable mentions. So it's kind of covering my favorite movies of the 1970s, and I'll specifically go through my top 10 as I've done every decade up to now. I started with the 2010s and went down. Now I'm at the 1970s. So I think it'll be a pretty big year. I think it's pretty popular, or decade, I should say. Pretty popular decade. I've heard a lot of people say this is their favorite decade of movies. I wouldn't say it's my favorite decade. Uh, 90s is still like my favorite decade. When I made up my top 10 for my 90s, like I had so many great movies that were like in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. This definitely has two. This has about two movies that are about, or I think one movie that's definitely my top 10. Second movie close to my top 10. So I mean, not nearly as many big ones as the 90's, but still, there's definitely some really big ones in this decade that I absolutely love. And every decade usually has, it's easy to find 10 movies that I love. So yeah, definitely a good decade. Definitely a very important decade, I would say. A lot changed during this decade. 1970's brought on um, movie making really got um, much more. I don't know what the word is. It got more violent, a lot more sexual activity, nudity. Basically, the decade where we started rated R movies. So pushing the boundaries, I should say, it's really a decade where we really were pushing the boundaries of what we can do, and as far as morality, I'd say in movie making. Um, Obviously, and whether that's good or bad, you can probably debate. Sometimes I think we got too far with all that, but uh, it's definitely a period of time where we also did a lot of experimental, I think, filmmaking. There's definitely some very strange films in this decade. Um, I I want to say like this is a decade where we get like Tommy, the movie from the Who album Rock Opera, which is a very weird movie. Um, Also, Jesus Christ Superstar, which is a musical I really enjoy, but is a very weird movie. And so I don't know, some of the experimentals that they do, I don't think work that well. I think they went a little too far. It's kind of a decade of, lots of drugs, I think, and LSD is going crazy, and a lot of hippies are making movies at this time period, anyways. But it's very interesting. We get some really huge directors coming out of this period of time. We think of Steven Spielberg. I mean, with this really huge hit with Jaws in '75, which starts the whole summer blockbuster that we have today. Every summer, we get the big blockbusters that make tons of money in the box office. And you can look back at Jaws being kind of the first one, besides Jaws being like one of the great thrillers of all time, and you can maybe call horror movie, thriller. It really set Steven Spielberg as like one of the great directors. He would also go on to do, I think, Close Encounters of the Third Kind later that decade, and then really hit off in the '80's for sure. You also get Martin Scorsese coming in. He definitely pushed the boundaries of like violence and sex and all that, I think, during this time period. You get Taxi Driver, which is a very interesting movie, very dark. I mean, '70's you get some very dark movies. I feel like it's a decade of like the anti-hero, where you get the protagonist that you're rooting for, but they're not really that good of a person. When I think of Taxi Driver, I always think of that like I should be rooting for this guy. This guy's got a lot of problems. He's kind of mentally unstable, but he is the hero of the story, played brilliantly by Robert De Niro. And I think of also uh, One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson's character Murphy is like not really a good person. He's a terrible person, but he is your main hero of the story. So we get a lot of these anti-heroes, I would call them, uh, during this period of time, which is very interesting. I mean, you get so many dark movies like, say, Apocalypse Now, Chinatown, like I said, Taxi Driver, One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest. Just very dark, disturbing movies that come off very big. Like I said. Of course, you get the biggest franchise of all time, Star Wars, coming out in 1977. George Lucas makes him a huge, director. Though he'd go on not to do as much filmmaking, it seems like, but he's also a huge part of film because of Star Wars, and that makes that's the biggest blockbuster of the decade, and one of the big blockbusters of all time. Starts the greatest franchise of all time, and really pushed the limits of sci-fi filmmaking, CGI or special effects, costuming, all that. Um, yeah, so I mean, absolutely huge movie that influenced a whole lot of decade of filmmakers afterwards. So you have to put him up as one of the greats of that time. Uh, yeah, and there's some other ones, but those are the big ones I think of as movie directors that have gone on to continue to make films today, almost coming out of the '70s, like I said, and just really, I don't know, changed filmmaking. Really, I feel like in the '70s. We get kind of, I would say, horror movies are really taken off because of violence. I think we get like the first big slasher at Halloween, which is one of the biggest horror franchises of all time, and I think almost changes like the horror franchise in a bit. Where we get a lot of these slasher type films like Halloween with Michael Myers, and definitely push the limits of like violence and nudity and all that. Um, and there's some other ones I'm probably not thinking of. I'm sure that were also huge in the '70s. As far I know, in the '80s we get a lot more. I feel like horror movies that are like big franchises, but '70s definitely feels like the first decade. Maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre I think came out in the '70s. So that was another one that was very, very violent and it was very shocking. Oh, Exorcist being like maybe the biggest one coming out of this decade, which I think was nominated for maybe Best Picture, and it really grossed people out. It really started this whole demon possession kind of horror genre, I want to say, and absolutely shocked people back in the '70s. Not as shocking today, but back then, I mean, that was the most shocking movie making I think anybody's ever seen. Anyway, so that definitely was a huge influence in horror movies. So yeah, so I think you get a lot of that during this time period. Anyway, so yeah, so that's me ranting about the 1970s. I think and what was great. A lot of great actors. You're getting a lot of not meta. I forget what we call them. You get these actors that are really into the roles, and even when the camera's off, they're still like acting like those characters. I mean, you get like I said, Robert De Niro, obviously a brilliant actor coming during this decade. Who really changes. Does a lot to his body to be the character. Jack Nicholson, I think, is probably the best actor of the decade. I mean, absolutely brilliant. In Who One Flew with the Cuckoo Nest, won his Oscar for Best Actor. But he was doing a lot of risque roles, it seems like, and a lot of I think. Well, no, I think. Uh, no, I think I was thinking of Shining. That might have came out in the 1980s. So, but still, Jack Nicholson was doing some crazy characters during this time period. Dustin Hoffman obviously was really big in this time period. So those some of the actors I can think of that really were like these actors that really changed almost acting, like the way they like I said, the anti-hero was really huge, and I think all those actors kind of fit this. They're not the typical like handsome actor, but they were really good leads because of they were so good at acting, and just a lot of great actors were coming out, I think, during this time period. So it's definitely a very interesting time period to study and to research, I think. Anyways, a lot of great films anyway. So sorry, I'm gonna get to my comments here. I'm just kind of going off on the 1970s. Yeah, video tastes, Gareth, tricky list. Yeah, I think a lot of people absolutely love the decade of the '70s. And there's some really big movies I'm not going to have on my list because I'm not into the really. I have trouble with really dark, disturbing movies. So my list is going to be looking a little different probably. But Sophie, thank you, Sophie, being very kind. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a while, Sophie. I'm glad to see you on here. Caleb, hey, how's it going? Uh, what's this? Video tasties. Gareth loves Judas. Not sure what that means. Yeah, Night Seven had the best thrillers. Yeah, definitely thrillers were getting really huge. Like I said, with Spielberg was so good at them. he was definitely pushing the limits with Jaws. I think was really scary at the time. Nobody wanted to go out into the water because of Jaws. Sophie the Warriors, yeah, that's kind of like this cult classic film. Warriors come out to play. Yeah, somewhat influential. We see a lot of movies that have kind of a warrior type feel to them, I would say. So two of my favorite musicals I can think of came out in the 70's, which are the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Bugsy Malone. I don't know Bugsy Malone. Rocky Horror Picture Show, that's an interesting one. That was definitely one of the biggest cult classics, I guess you can say. Yeah, musical. Deal with really risque ideas. I mean, you have like this transvestite from Transylvania, played by Tim Curry, uh, walking around in like women's lingerie kind of underwear kind of thing. Very, very strange at the time, and a lot of strange characters. Very strange movie overall. Not one of my favorites personally, but I know it has a big following. I guess if you like that kind of those kind of movies anyway. So yeah, pretty good decade, and there's some big musicals here. I'm going to talk about them because I have some in my top 10. Uh, yeah, the 60's definitely was like the big decade for musicals, and into the 70's also we get some other great musicals as well. But yeah, thank you, Sophie. Let's see, Gareth calls me Judas. Really? All right, talk about some movies on my honorable mentions. I don't have as many movies in the 70's I have in other decades so far, but I think the further I go from when I was born, the least amount of movies I'm having in that decade. I'm trying to I'm buying movies, constantly to try to catch up with my favorite movies. I still got many movies to still buy to put on my shelf. But anyways, so I'll name some movies that I don't have that I do wanted to acknowledge in the 1970's. First movie I want to acknowledge is Patton, which is about General Patton. Came out in 1970, won Best Picture, won Best Actor for George C. Scott, who plays Patton. Very good film. I've only seen it like one time though, so it's a film I really need to see again. I remember seeing it and really enjoying it. George C. Scott, great actor, really great performance. Interesting character, Patton. He was very politically incorrect type of a general, very blunt, kind of wasn't exactly the rule follower, I should say, but he was a really good general and did a lot of good. And it kind of interesting following his career during World War II as like a tank general. Anyway, but yeah, I think very good film. Anyways, Patton, I would recommend. Another movie, kind of an anti-war movie, I guess today, is MASH, which you didn't know is not just a TV show; it was a movie back in the 70's, and it's a very interesting movie. It definitely like if you've seen the TV show, it's kind of like that where obviously it's a comedy, but yeah, it's also some serious take on how bad war is, and kind of they almost kind of make fun of the not the war itself, but the fact that they're at war and how ridiculous and how much they hate being. And it's about doctors during Korean War. They have a medical center wherever somewhere in Korea, and of course soldiers that are hurt come in, and they have to do they see a lot of soldiers die, and so it's very it's a hard job to do for sure, but it's an interesting movie. I enjoy it. It has a lot of good comedy in it, a good cast. I think Donald Sutherland, I know, is like one of the main actors in it, who's very good at the lead. I think there's some nudity in there, so it does like I said, push boundaries of showing nudity. Not a lot, but some of that, and a lot of sexual jokes and stuff like that. Anyways, but yeah, very fun movie. MASH, I would recommend. Another one I recommend is Network. Very interesting movie. Was it Sidney Lumet? Movie has a huge cast. I'm forgetting on top of my head who's in it, but it has a really good cast. I remember it's a very good performance movie. It won like 3 Oscars for acting. I think won like Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress. I think it was Faye Dunaway, I think, was the actress who won Best Actress from that movie. Best Actor, Peter Finch, I think his name was, who won Best Actor and died before he won the Oscar. So he was one of the first ones to win it posthumously. Anyways, a very good performance. Has the great, I want you to stick your head out the window and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." Anyway, so great scene. But yeah, really fun movie. I mean, the performances are just really, really great throughout. It's interesting to look at, ratings and like ethical or more, do you do things that are unethical to get ratings because it's about TV, news show, doing some unethical things to get ratings anyway. So it does talk about some interesting subject matter there. Um, got Andy from Forgotten World Movies. Hey, Andy, I'm doing pretty good. Doing what I like to do, talk about movies. Doing the live stream. Hope everybody enjoys hearing me talk about it. Some of my favorite movies from this time period. Another movie I want to recommend is Heaven Can Wait. Warren Beatty directed, starred, and like wrote the movie. And Warren Beatty was, I mean, one of the great like triple threats, I guess I know we call it, because he directed, he acted, of course, and he also wrote a lot of movies that he was in. And this was one of my favorite of his, and it's a very good movie. It's actually like a remake. They've done this story before where a guy gets called into heaven, but then it turns out that he's not his time yet to die. So then the angel puts him back into another body, and he has to live like life with this other body and this other life. Anyway, so very good premise. Warren Beatty's very good in it. This time he's a quarterback who goes up to heaven, but then he gets put into an rich man's body, and he still wants to be a quarterback. But yeah, that's good combination of comedy, a little bit of drama maybe, but mostly comedy. It's a good comedy piece, I think, and a very fun movie. Anyways, I have to recommend Heaven Can Wait. Recommend Kelly's Heroes. It's a World War II kind of war comedy with Clint Eastwood at the lead. And you got like Don Rickles is so funny in the movie. Telly Savalas is very good in it. And yeah, it's one I definitely enjoy watching where they're in War II and they hear about in this town, there's a bank that has a bunch of gold in it in the safe. And so Donald Sutherland, also very funny in it. I love him in the movie as kind of this hippie tank commander. Anyways, and so they kind of go off, kind of go rogue, I guess, to go to this bank, this Nazi bank, and to take the gold from it, and like, kind of, I don't know if you want to say go missing in action or whatever, but MIA, but they kind of go off just to get gold anyways. And yeah, it's really a good World War II comedy. I recommend. Early like a movie called Love Story. It's it's this very famous movie about this couple, and I think they're in Harvard or something like that, and it's this they hate each other at first, but then they fall in love. But then, spoiling the movie, she then like catches some kind of disease and she's dying. Anyway, so it's very sad kind of at the end, but it's actually a very good romantic comedy. I think the comedy works very well. I think the chemistry between the two main actors are really, really good. And it has like the famous, love means never saying you're sorry. It's one of the great lines from the movie. Also, really great musical score. I love the musical score from Love Story anyway. So it's, again, I know it probably gets some flack because it's a little too, on the love side but I enjoy a good romantic comedy love story every once in a while. Another movie I'd recommend is Jeremiah Johnson. Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford, where he goes off into the woods and becomes like a mountain man who lives on his own. And it kind of follows his adventures like in the wilderness, surviving. And then he gets attacked by Indians. And so it's got some really good stuff. Robert Redford's really good in it. Really good. I want to say hidden gem. I don't know how many people know about Jeremiah Johnson, but very good movie. I have to recommend Blazing Saddles, of course, one of the great Mel Brooks comedies at this time. You got Gene Wilder is one of my favorite actors during this time period. Very funny in it. Of course, you got the Mel Brooks. Madeline Kahn is great. She actually gets nominated for Best Supporting Actress for playing this very comedic role, but she was great during the 70s. And Mel Brooks, I love Mel Brooks comedies. This is one of the first big ones, I think, after The Producers that came out in the 60s. This definitely kind of paved his way to be like the king of parody movies, where he does pretty much almost just parody movies from this time on. But yeah, definitely a comedy classic. Definitely pushes the boundaries of what you can do as far as, the subject matter and so forth. But yeah. The movie I'll recommend, though it's not a movie I rewatch a lot, is I mentioned Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver, I think one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, I would say. Robert De Niro, I think, gives the best performance of his life. Like, I think he could have won the Oscar for Best Actor. I mean, he's so good in this role as was it Bixel, Travis Bixel or something like that. This taxi driver who then meets a 13-year-old prostitute played by Jodie Foster, and then he wants to try to save her from prostitution. Anyways, and he also seems like he maybe wants to assassinate this Senate candidate or something, and he also he's trying to woo this girl that he is very pretty that's campaigning for this guy, and that doesn't go well because he takes her to a porno theater on a date, which I would guess that's not a good first date to go on. I've never done that myself, so but yeah, it's a very interesting character, very obviously disturbed, mentally disturbed type of character, but De Niro played it so well. Love the last scene where he's got the mohawk, he's got those round glasses, sunglasses. He got that. I think he's got that like military jacket. I mean, such a great look and a very violent last sequence. But yeah, it's not. I said it's a little dark for me. So it's not one I go to, not one I'll probably buy myself. But I have to recognize, yeah, it's definitely one of the big movies of that decade. Let's see, Sophie. Love these lives. Always discovering new movies. Good. I'm recommending these movies. I don't know if anybody's seen all these. If you haven't, hopefully you take some of these recommendations. That's why I enjoy doing these kind of things. Talk about the movies that I really enjoy. That hopefully either other people like, or if they don't know them, hopefully they'll watch them at some point. The Poseidon Adventure is one. It's one of probably my favorite disaster movies. I mean, also one of the best casts of all time. I mean, you have Gene Hackman in there, Ernest Borgnine. It's got so many great actors in that movie, and the whole ship turns upside down, and they try to get to the top. It's pretty sad, though. I have to say, it's a hard one to watch because there's a lot of people that die and so forth, but still kind of a good disaster movie. I have to throw in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, won Best Picture in '75, Best Actor for Jack Nicholson. Again, it's a bit dark because it deals with mental health and people that are in a mental institution. Louise Fletcher, who plays Nurse Ratched, also gives one of the best like villain roles, who just passed away this last year, not that long ago. One of the few movies to win the 5 big ones: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. So a very big movie. Again, it's got some really good performances in there. Jack Nicholson, of course, is great. It's an interesting movie. It has a not very happy ending, I would say. So it's not one I go back to, but I do recognize there's some really good things in that movie. The last movie I'm going to talk about that I don't own that I recommend is Dog Day Afternoon. I think another Sidney Lumet movie. He's really big during this decade, and Al Pacino gives one of the great performances. Like, Al Pacino gives so many great performances throughout the whole decade. He's one of the great actors of this period. I didn't mention before. He's another guy that's very good, intense actor, and this role is so intense. I mean, they're robbing a bank, but then they have to take hostages, but they really don't want to kill the hostages. And they're trying to negotiate with the police, how to get out of it. But Pacino, he's like, I don't know, he's like pale and he's like sweating throughout the whole movie. And I don't know, he's just so good in this role. I think he should have won an Oscar for Dog Day Afternoon. Anyways, but yeah, and it has some surprising comedy in it as well. And you almost kind of like the main characters, even though they're robbing a bank and have hostages. Anyway, so a very interesting movie. Like I said, but very good. I got Norn in the chat. Hey, Norn, good to talk to you. I already talked about some horror movies, Norn. I was thinking if you were on here, you can tell me. I thought '70s was a pretty good year for horror movies because you had The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, and Halloween are some of the big influential movies of this Halloween genre or horror genre, I should say. So I figured you could back me up on that, Norn, if you're still listening. Yeah, Christopher Lloyd and Danny DeVito are the very first performances are in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is kind of interesting to see them as some of the mental patients. Carrie, yes, Carrie. I knew I forgot something. Yeah, Carrie's another great horror movie during this time period. Stephen King is like absolutely huge at this time, with Carrie and Shining and It and all these great horror book classics, novels coming out. And they made some really big movies out of them. Carrie's the first book that Stephen King wrote, and I think the first book or first movie that they adapted. And I'm not a horror guy, but I do enjoy some parts of Carrie. Sissy Spacek is really good. Oh, John Travolta makes it's one of his first appearances, I think, in a movie. In that one, so many good actors make appearances in horror movies. Like, of course, Halloween. You have I forgot her name already. The Scream Queen herself. And then you get in Carrie, you get John Travolta. In Friday 13th, you get Kevin Bacon. In Nightmare on Elm Street, you get Johnny Depp. So it's kind of interesting to see these big actors kind of young in their first roles of that period. But yeah, Carrie's great. I love the blood. I just love that scene when the blood falls on her and she's like shocked, and it's such a great look. Sissy Spacek with the blood all over her, and she's looking around, so intense, and then she starts moving things with her mind, and you can tell she's gonna go psycho and kill everybody. That's such a great scene. They do kind of slow motion, but yeah. So Carrie's a great one. So you know where I see Black Christmas is not one I'm familiar with, but I've heard of. And also Alice, Sweet Alice. So great name drops in horror films. See, Norman knows so much more about horror than I do. Johnny Depp, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, he has a great death scene, I think, in that one as well. Norn, me and you, we need to get on a live stream. I told Mike, me, you, and Mike need to do a top 10 favorite wrestlers at some point. So that's one I want to do maybe sometime in December. We'll see. Anyway, so glad to have you, Norn. Okay, some a little more honorable mentions I have left before I get to my top 10 that I actually own. Late 70s is also a good decade for kung fu movies. And if you know me, I'm a fan of martial arts kung fu movies. I usually talk about them on any live stream. I have some recommendations. Obviously, Bruce Lee comes out big in the 1970s. Really made kung fu movies popular in America because they were huge in China, but they hadn't come out to America yet until about Enter the Dragon was the first one that really crossed over to America. And we started getting these Bruce Lee movies, and we're like, oh my gosh, I want more of this, kung fu action. And the kung fu drama definitely started picking up at that point. He, of course, famously made 5 movies and then died, unfortunately, and at a young age. Big ones to me, Enter the Dragon is probably the best one. I like Return of the Dragon or I think it's called Return of the Dragon in America. I think in China, it's called The Way of the Dragon. And that's great because you get the big Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris battle, them fighting in the Roman Coliseum. Really great fight scene. Love seeing those two big juggernauts and, martial arts, fighting against each other. Obviously, Fist of Fury, The Big Boss, Chinese Connection are all also really big ones during this time period. Then Jackie Chan kind of comes up. Jackie Chan's probably my favorite martial artist, kung fu fighter. He starts coming up big in the late 70s with Drunken Master, Snake in the Eagle's Shadow. What's it called? I think it's called the Fighting Hyena or something like that. The Hyena. But yeah, he makes some really good, and he really starts the whole kind of action comedy where he puts a lot of comedy in his action movies. I don't own those, but those are some really good recommendations there. I do have two kung fu movies from the 70s because one of the big kung fu movies was called The Five Deadly Venoms, which kind of introduces this, has these actually six martial artists that kung fu fighters that this director kind of put together. And they made like 6 or 7 movies together, this director and these specific kung fu actors. And Five Deadly Venoms was like huge. It's considered one of the great kung fu movies. Because and I like it because each it has like these 5 individuals who have a nickname that their nickname has to deal with a venomous creature. Like one's called Snake, one's called Toad. I guess I don't know, toads are venomous, but I think one's like a spider or something, tarantula or something. I forget. One's lizard, uh, one's centipede. Anyway, so it's supposed to be these venomous creatures, and so it's very interesting. I love how they use those names, and so you can identify each, and each have like their own specific like fighting style. So you can kind of see even when they have a mask on, which one's which. Anyways, but they did like a bunch of movies together. Uh, One I really like is called The Kid with the Golden Arm, which is a very strange title. um, but the idea is the bad guy there, he has metal arms, so he doesn't fight with a weapon. He just fights with his arms because he can block swords and spears with his arm. Is the whole idea behind it. But some really good fight scenes in that one. The storyline's a little goofy, but that's pretty common for kung fu movies. The plot's not usually that good, but you watch them just to watch the fight scenes, and these are some really great choreographed fight scenes. My favorite of theirs, one of my favorite kung fu movies of all time. This is called The Return of the Deadly Venoms, aka The Crippled Avengers. It came out as The Crippled Avengers is really the name of the movie in China, but when they marketed it for Americans, they named it The Return of the Five Deadly Venoms because the Five Deadly Venoms was such a huge movie. And even though this has no connection with the Five Deadly Venoms, they always did that Return of so and so, just so you go, oh yeah, I know that. I've heard the Five Deadly Venoms. This has nothing to do with the Five Deadly Venoms, but it has the same actors from the Five Deadly Venoms, so that's why they do that. But yeah, amazing choreographed movie. So many great fight scenes, very acrobatic. Lots of sword fightings and spear fightings, and these fighters are just absolute masters at weapon fighting. Besides hand-to-hand fighting, anyways, there's just so many great scenes. And it's got some good comedy in there. It's got one of the best like training montages. I love good training montage, and it has a great, learning how to teach kung fu montage that I always enjoy. Anyway, so yeah, that's one I recommend. If you ever want to watch a kung fu movie, if anybody's out there that likes that kind of genre like me. Mike here. Hey, hope you're well. I'm in the cinema in Liverpool, ready to see The Menu. Have a great stream. Yeah, I know Mike's in Liverpool, so I knew he wasn't, unfortunately, not going to be on the stream. I try to do these streams early afternoon here because I know my friends in England, it's in the evening for them. So I hope I'm doing these early enough that they can be on the live stream. I have so much love from the English community, movie community here that I really want to do this for them. But yeah, I hope you're having a good time in Liverpool, Mike, home of the Beatles, my favorite band. I hope you get to see some cool stuff there, and I think you're going to Comic-Con or something there. Fist of Fury, I have a huge love for. Yeah, Fist of Fury was like I don't know, talking about the first Bruce Lee movie, or that's the second one. But yeah, definitely. All of his movies were like huge because he only made like 5 of them. See, Jason, you're taking me back to middle school when I discovered these films. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of when I became a fan of some of these films. Middle school, junior high. One of my favorites is Rocky. Yes, that's definitely one that's going to come up in my top 10, Mike. You know me. It's 7:33 here in the UK. Yeah, so hopefully I'm hitting you at a good time. You can watch these live streams with me. Anyway, so yeah, I also have to mention Norn. You'll enjoy this, hopefully, Norn. Being a big James Bond fan, I definitely had to talk about some James Bond movies during this time period. We got Moonraker. This is the Roger Moore era, my favorite, kind of my favorite era of Bond, really. Spy Who Loved Me, and The Man with the Golden Gun. Three that I have right now. I need to get Live or Let Die and For Your Eyes Only are some of my favorites that I don't have on here. But obviously, yeah, love James Bond in his time period. I like Roger Moore. He's got a great comedic uh, uh, style to him of James Bond, and just really good. And I really enjoy a lot of those movies. I love the campier they are, the better, I guess. Like I don't want them to be serious. I want them to be kind of outrageous and kind of out there. That's what I like about James Bond. Like I love Jaws is my favorite henchman because he scared the heck out of me as a kid. I remember watching James Bond as a kid and seeing I forget his name. The guy who played Jaws. You know, he's like 7 feet tall, huge guy, got these metal teeth, and he's got this great smile when he smiles with those metal teeth. That you go, oh my god, like I would not want to mess with this guy. So it's got probably that's my favorite henchman in James Bond. So I enjoy that he comes back for 2 movies. He was such a kind of fan favorite, I think. But yeah, I know Norrin, you really liked The Spy Who Loved Me. Yeah, very good. Like I said, I love Jaws in that one. Moonraker gets a lot made fun of, but I actually kind of enjoy that movie and going into space and all that. Again, Jaws is great in that one. But yeah, Live and Let Die. I remember watching that as a kid, and that scene where the bad guy they have James Bond and the girl uh, on this thing that's going down into the water, and there's like shark or something in the water, and they're lowering him like slowly into the water, and he first cuts his arm so that the shark will smell his blood. And I remember, man, that was like, as a kid watching that, I remember just being like, how is James Bond going to get out? That really kind of excited me for James Bond as a kid, watching that kind of stuff. And I think as a kid, just those movies really were kind of thrilling for me. And I have such nostalgia for kind of those old 70s, 60s Bonds. I know Norrin, he talks about Bond a lot during this time period. So I know he's a fan of hopefully of these movies as well. Anyway, so those are my honorable mentions of the movies I have. Hopefully now I get to my top 10 favorite movies of the decade. Wait a minute. Yeah. First movie is a romantic comedy called The Goodbye Girl, starring Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason. You see in the lead there. Neil Simon movie. Neil Simon, one of the great comedy writers, I would say, of the 70s. I think he wrote a lot of plays, also wrote a lot of movies during his time period. And Goodbye Girl, I've always enjoyed. Richard Dreyfuss came out in 1977. If you don't know, Richard Dreyfuss won the Oscar for Best Actor for the movie, going up against like Woody Allen from Annie Hall. And Richard Dreyfuss was just he was kind of on fire during this time period, I'd say, because he was in he was in American Graffiti. And I don't know, 73, 74, kind of the first movie I saw him in. And then 75, he got Jaws. And then he got Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think that might have came after this movie. But then you have The Goodbye Girl, where he wins the Oscar. So he had a good, 5-6 years there where he was on top. And Norrin says he likes Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah. And like I said, Mr. Holland's Opus was my number one movie of the 90s. And Richard Dreyfuss was just absolutely brilliant in that. So, when you take Mr. Holland's Opus, The Goodbye Girl, I mean, Richard Dreyfuss, I haven't seen a lot of movies, I feel like, with him in it, but the ones I see, he's so good. Obviously, What About Bob is a really good comedy with Richard Dreyfuss. Anyways, but yeah, this is, like I said, it's really funny. Neil Simon is so good with dialogue, and it's one of those movies where the two hate each other at first. I mean, and they really hate each other in this movie, and they're just constantly yelling and insulting each other. Of course, they eventually fall in love. And the idea behind the movie is Marsha Mason's character. She has a daughter. She's like a single mother. She's in New York. She goes to this apartment that her boyfriend owns or whatever, or rents. And she gets there, and he's not there. And it turns out he left her. And I guess the Goodbye Girl means she always gets these guys, and they leave her. And in comes Richard Dreyfuss' character, Garfield, I think his name is. He comes in not knowing that she's there, and he, I guess, got the apartment from her boyfriend. And so there's this, mix of, who gets to stay and who has to leave, and they decide to stay there together and share, of course, the rent money. Anyways, and Garfield's like a struggling actor, in New York, doing plays, and uh, anyways, and so yeah, they don't get along, and then one of the great scenes, they kind of finally decide to, yeah, they're gonna try and compromise and live together. And she like gives him all these rules, like, okay, you need to do this, and then Garfield, Richard Josh's character, who's like actually like paying for, I think he's actually paying the rent because she didn't have any money. He's like, I'm paying the rent. Here are the rules, and then he kind of goes through, and I don't like panties hanging on the line or something like that, because she hangs her like underwear on the shower curtain, whatever, and he pulls them down, and he says, and I like to sleep naked before. Very funny line. He's like, so if I want to go out and get a snack, you better make sure your daughter's not around unless she wants to get educated. Anyways, it's such a great scene. Anyway, it's very funny. Anyways, yeah, it's one I've always enjoyed for the comedy aspect. Romantic part, maybe not as much, though I do enjoy the ending. It has a happy ending to it. Yeah, I recommend The Goodbye Girl for a good romantic comedy if you like that kind of thing. Number 9 is a Disney classic, one of my favorite growing up, one of my childhood favorites, and that is Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Get Angela Lansbury, the late Angela Lansbury, who just passed away recently. Also, the actor here, I really enjoy David Tomlinson. Really good. Obviously, David Tomlinson was in Mary Poppins, and this has a very Mary Poppins feel. It feels like almost like a sequel to Mary Poppins in a way, because it has the same director. I think Robert Stevenson, who directed a lot of great Disney movies at this time. But it's got the same director. You got the same writers. You got the Sherman Brothers writing the music, who were the great songwriters for Disney. Won a lot of Oscars for them, or won some anyways. And they all worked on Mary Poppins, so it definitely has the same feel to it. There's a scene where they're in the island of Baboombu or something like that, and it's this all this 2D animated sequence, and the main actors are interacting with 2D animation, which they do in Mary Poppins. So that's always a fun scene as a kid. But yeah, Beds on Brewster's great movie. Has music in it as well, of course. I always enjoy a good musical. I love the adventure aspect of it. Angela Lansbury's character is a apprentice witch. She's learning how to be a witch and use magic to fight against the Nazis, because it's World War II era, and so she wants to help England fight the Nazis. And so she's learning magic, and she's getting this information from this professor, this so-called professor, played by David Thomason. And she ends up having to take in these kids because of the bombings in London, and they find out she's a witch. And anyway, so they go on this adventure where she puts a spell on a door or a bed knob, and they twist it, and then the bed like travels to wherever they want to go. Anyway, so it's a really fun premise. One I absolutely loved as a kid, and like still one I have so much nostalgia for. That's why I still have in my top 10 in 1970s. Like I said, most people are going to have Taxi Driver or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or number of movies. But I tend to go for the lighthearted movies over the darker, serious movies. That's just the way I am. So yeah, so I still have some, and I'm a big fan of Disney. I grew up on Disney, so I always have them a really special place in my heart for like these Disney live action movies, and of course animated as well. But yeah, really fun movie. Some good songs and dance numbers. I think it won the Oscar for like special effects because it has some great moments where she like makes her clothes come alive, and her clothes are like moving around, and they kind of do a dance, and then they kind of get into a fight. It's a really fun sequence, but it's like, man, how did they do that? They had to move the clothes around and make it look like, someone was, they had to, I don't know, I'm not sure how they did it, but they made it move around and you don't see any strings or anything. So it was pretty incredible. One of my favorite scenes at the very end The Nazis have invaded like this English town that they're in, and she has a spell. The whole movie, she's trying to come up with this locomotion spell where she can make inanimate objects come to life. And so she learns it. And so at the very end, there's a museum in the town that has all this medieval armor in it. And I just absolutely love this as a kid, of course, this idea of like she uses a spell and makes all the medieval armor come to life. And so there's this medieval armor that nobody's inside, that's just hollow. And they go out and they're fighting the Nazis. And it's such a fun. I mean, the sequence where they all rise and they start this song. It's a great sequence. The music is great. The visuals of this army of empty medieval armor. Absolutely loved it as a kid, and I still enjoy that sequence. And always enjoy when you fight the Nazis and you're kicking butt. So, yeah, I think it's still a really fun movie, even if you're an adult like me. Really good family film. I think Sophie likes it. See, I bloody love Bedknobs and Broomsticks, especially seeing with the little boy, and he says, "What's that got to do with my knob?" Yeah, because the little boy kind of controls the knob. She gives it to him. What does that got to do with my knob? Dr. Winston, how's it going, Dr. Winston? Close Encounters of the Third Kind, yeah, very big movie. One of Spielberg's great movies of the time period. I got Josh from Classic Reviews. Hey, Josh, how you doing? Doing good. Anybody, yeah, feel free to comment. What are your favorite movies of this decade? I enjoyed seeing those. Obviously, some really good ones there. Okay, my next movie is another Neil Simon comedy, and it's called The Out of Towners. This with Jack Lemmon and Sandy Dennis. Yeah, Sandy Dennis. Jack Lemmon, if you know, is one of my favorite actors of all time. I think maybe the best comedic actor of all time. He is absolutely hilarious in like movies like this, especially. One of my favorite comedies. If you don't know this one, Out of Towners, they did a remake with Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn in the 2000s, but it was not nearly as good as this one because Jack Lemmon is just so good, and it's really him and St. Dennis are the main two characters throughout the movie, and they have really good chemistry. They're this married couple that go to, I think, New York because he has a job interview, and they're from Ohio, I think. And while they're there, of course, everything goes wrong. The plane is delayed or something like that. So then they get to their hotel late, and the hotel didn't hold their room, so someone else got their room. So they have and they're trying to get another room, but there's no room in the hotel. So then they try to go to another hotel. They get robbed, and so they don't have any money, and then they're sleeping in the park. And it's just one bad thing happens after another. It's like one of those, comedy classics of, everything goes wrong. And but Jack Nicholson, absolutely hilarious. He's on his A game as far as comedy at this movie. And him and Sand, his wife, they get along really well, actually. They don't really bicker too much. But I do love how he's very neurotic, I guess you'd say. And he's always doing things like if he's mad at somebody, he's like, write your name down and your address because my lawyer is going to get with you. He keeps threatening people with getting his lawyer, and nobody's like really scared of him. He also like always says something. He says, my wife will avow or something like that. Will vow to it, and she goes, I vow or something like that. And a lot of funny like things like that. Or he's so he obviously has like so much anxiety, and so, but he always puts it on his wife. He's always like he says something. He says, "Well, no, don't worry," and he's the one worried. But he tells his wife, stop worrying, and she's like, "I'm not worried." And very funny back and forth, and just a really really great comedy. If you haven't seen it, I just recommend Out of Towners. It's one of the great comedies of the time period. See, yeah, Josh is going to be on Scott the Critics live stream later. I'm just reading the chats here. Let's see. My favorite 70s film is Mirror. I don't know that one, but Andrei Tarkovsky. But absolute masterclass filmmaking. Okay, Josh like really knows a lot more about the indie films or the in international films more than me, so he always comes up with these ones that I don't know about. But uh, love Italian giallo, Dario Argento's films, Lucio Fucci. Okay, again, don't know these international films as well as some of you guys. That maybe are some really good classics. But yeah, so that's Outer Towners at number, was that number 8? Number 7, here's one of my first musical I'm talking about. One that I just bought and rewatched. That is Grease. Uh, there with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. Again, I keep saying these actors and actresses that just passed away. So it's like the third time. Olivia Newton-John just passed away this last year. I love this style, the pink on it and the black. But yeah, love this musical. Big fan of musicals. One of my favorite. This one I grew up on as a kid, even though it's watching again, man, there's some really risque stuff in it. And there's talks, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on here, and very politically incorrect look. The guys, of course, are very sex obsessed, and they don't hide that. They do some unethical things during the movie, I have to say, and the way they talk about women is a little cringy, I would say. So it's funny looking back at it and going, man, I don't think we can make this movie again because it's just too politically incorrect. Kind of look at men and women and all that. But yeah, I love the musical. So many great songs. I love those summer nights at the beginning. That kind of, and I love how they edit it between the T-Birds and the Pink Ladies, whatever, as they're, and the T-Birds are on the stands, and I love how they're moving across the stands and how the whole dance choreography is so good in the whole movie. But yeah, love that. Love the whole the high schools like putting on this dance competition and they're on TV. Love that whole sequence because I love that it's the style is they're in the 50s, so I love the clothes, I love the dresses and the suits. Especially John Travolta has like this pink shirt with a pink like what do you call it? Or what do we call it on his pocket thing? What do you call it? Anyways, but it's like this pink with this, I don't know, I just love the color scheme of it. But yeah, the costumes are just absolutely great. I love the 50s style. Love the cars. The 50s style cars are really fun. And the whole setting, the dialogue is really funny. Overall, it's a really funny movie. I think Travolta is absolutely hilarious. I love the way he just walks. He just like has this like strut every time he walks. He just has to. He can't walk normal, and it just absolutely makes me laugh just watching Travolta walk around. The actor who plays Kaneki is like so cool. Like he's like the ultimate cool guy. And they're all great together. Of course, Olivia Newton-John's absolutely beautiful. Also, probably the biggest costume is that black leather outfit she wears at the end. I mean, all guys are like, whoa, your eyes go boom, 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 looking at Olivia Newton-John. And then I love the whole last sequence is so great where they're at this. It's at the end of the year, and they have this carnival thing, and they sing the "You're the one that I want." Boom, 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 boom. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Like that whole sequence is so good. The dance choreography there, as they're moving about. Travolta is so good. I got chills. They're multiplying. So good. Those two together, really good duet song, really fun. And then the very end with all the dancers coming out and they're doing that last sequence. Now I'm forgetting what it's called, but really great way to end the movie. But yeah, it's a really fun movie. I think story-wise, it has some problems, has some holes. Everything kind of gets the ending kind of all resolves itself a little too quickly with some of the relationships and everything. But the music is so good, and the style and the comedy is so good, and that it's still one of my favorite musicals. Let's see. Now Josh says, I love indie films. Yeah, you're much more into the indie films than I am. And then you would love the Italian films. Okay. The only Italian film I've seen, I think, is Beautiful Life with Roberto Benigni. that I had in my top 10 of the 90s, I believe. Grease is a lot of fun, even if the messages are very outdated. Yeah, it's very outdated. A lot of the stuff in it, I would say, but yeah, very fun musical. Dr. Winston, do you like horror, Jasons? No, I am not a fan of horror movies, Dr. Winston. Like I said, I can watch some like Carrie. Not a fan of necessarily, but I do enjoy moments of that. Like The Shining, I enjoy some parts of that. But overall, I don't watch horror movies, and I don't know a lot about them, to be honest. And Sophie, I think you said that before. I still have not seen Grease 2 because it gets a lot of bad reviews. It doesn't have Travolta or Olivia Newton-John in it. Don't really know much about it except that it's always been kind of made fun of as being a bad sequel. But I know Sophie, you like it, so maybe it's better than I'm putting off there. I should see it sometime. Okay, so that was number 7. I lose count when I'm not thinking. So number 6, another kind of musical comedy, I guess, very out there, and is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, with Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. Absolutely love Gene Wilder's performance. There's a oompa loompa doopy dee doo. Absolutely love Willy Wonka. Of course, as a kid, you absolutely love this idea of going to a chocolate factory, and there's this whole whole room was just everything's edible. As a kid, you're like, man, I want to go to that room where everything's chocolate and everything. And it's just a fun, unpredictable movie when you're first watching it, because you're like, where is this going? But yeah, I love Gene Wilder. One of my favorite Gene Wilder performances, and Gene Wilder's up there as one of my favorite actors, especially comedic actors, and he is so funny in this role, and so unpredictable. I mean, what's so good about it is like you don't really know, is this guy crazy? Is he a good guy? Is he bad? It's like you don't really know until the end. You find out, yeah, he's a good person. He's a little off maybe, but overall he's a really good person. But love the whole aesthetic of the going to the factory, all these kids getting the golden ticket. I've got a golden ticket, and they get to go to the golden ticket, and they get to go to this factory, which has all these crazy things happen. And each child, the childs are pretty misbehaved. So each one has something bad happen to them. And then the Oompa Loompas get to sing a song about, it's bad to chew gum. It's bad to be watching TV all the time. It's bad to be a greedy brat, I guess, and all this. And so some lessons learned there. But also the music is so good. I mean, I love, like, I Got a Golden Ticket. Even the Candyman song at the very beginning, when the Candyman's singing, and he's getting off the chocolate and everything. The musical score is really good as well. But I love, I especially love when they first go into the factory and he sings that world of imagination. Gene Wilder sings that song about, imagination or whatever, and really good sequence where they're going down the stairs, and Gene Wilder really does a really good job singing as well. But yeah, I love that sequence. All the Oompa Loompa songs, of course, are pretty good as well. Yeah, I love it because I love musicals, as you can probably tell. So I love the music in it, and it's absolutely hilarious. So many great comedic moments that you forget about when you're watching it. And it's just a really kind of fun, adventurous movie where of course, I know where it's going now because I've seen it so many times. But man, when you first watching it, it was like so magical because you're like, what's going to happen next? Because it's kind of this fun house factory, Anyway, so but yeah, absolutely love this movie. One of my childhood favorites. Let's see. Yeah, Jaws. Yeah, if you put that in the horror movie, like, I'm not a big Jaws fan, but yeah, that was definitely a big movie of the 70s. And so we said dark musical. Let's see. If you like Grease, try American Graffiti. Yeah. Yeah, because American Graffiti has a lot of 50s cars and music. It's really good with the music and the cars and so forth. And it was like George Lucas's first big film. Yeah. I'm not as big on that one, but yeah, I know that's a pretty good one as well. All right, now we're getting to my top 5 favorite movies of the 70s, I believe. Let's see. Yeah. So number 5, we're going to go with probably my favorite comedy of all time. and that is Young Frankenstein. I got this cool Blu-ray. Again, as I already said, I'm a big fan of Mel Brooks. This is my favorite Mel Brooks movie. It's a parody movie of Frankenstein. And Gene Wilder, like I said, already I just talked about him with Willy Wonka. This is probably my favorite Gene Wilder performance, though it's very close to Willy Wonka. Both are really great performances. Gene Wilder absolutely hilarious in this movie. It's really funny parody of the Frankenstein story, I would say. Uh, I don't know. It's like, what do you say? It's just so funny. Everything from, Frau Bruckler, the horse is going crazy, that whole thing. And there's so many like puns and stuff like that throughout the movie. I love whoa, what big knockers. Well, thank you, doctor. Werewolf, their wolf. And it just goes on and on, I absolutely love the scene where he tries to get the Frankenstein monster together, and Igor, of course, he calls himself Frankenstein because he doesn't want to be associated with Frankenstein. So that's a great line throughout the movie. My name is Frankenstein. And then you got Igor, or whatever. That also very funny, really great performance by that actor, which I don't know the actor that well, but he almost steals every scene as well. But although if he goes to get this brain, but he gets the abnormal brain, the very wrong brain you don't want to get. They put in the monster goes crazy, and they have to give him a sedative. And then love the scene. Gene Wilder's like, very calm, like, Igor, come over here. What brain did you put in there? And he's like, are you promised not to be upset? I will not be upset. He goes, well, I put Abby something. Abby Normal. And he goes on to this. I put an Abby Normal, I think is the name of the brain. And he's like, huh, you're telling me I put an abnormal brain in a 7-foot monster? I don't know. And then he goes crazy and starts choking him. Like Gene Wilder's so good at going from very calm to very, ecstatic. That's why I think it makes his comedy so great. And that's why some of these scenes are just so classic. And yeah, it's just a really silly comedy, I would say. But man, the like I said, the comedy works so well. Madeline Kahn has a small part in here. She's absolutely hilarious in just the very small part she has. And it kind of follows a lot of parodies of like Frankenstein, which I don't know Frankenstein that well, but you got the blind old man, you got the little girl at the well. I know those are like scenes from the movie, so you definitely got a lot of these kind of scenes that come from the actual movie, which very good parody of Frankenstein is from what I know. Anyways, but yeah, so absolutely love all that. It's just, I don't know, it's hard to talk about, but to say it's just a funny movie. You got the famous dance sequence at the end with putting on the Ritz, really great scene. But yeah, can't say enough. Love Young Frankenstein. Let's see, Dr. Winston. Yep. Yeah, Blazing Saddles was on my honorable mentions. Dr. Winston, definitely one of the great comedies of the 70s. One of Mel Brooks' best. Let's see, so that's 5. Number 4. Okay, now we're getting to the big ones. This movie is probably number 1 for everybody. It's not my number 1, but I do recognize it is a really good movie, and I understand why it's number 1, and that is The Godfather. Bum, 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 bum. Whatever, had that great musical score. Best Picture, I believe, 1972. Yeah, honestly, it's the biggest movie of the decade. If you polled 100 people, Godfather's probably number 1 of the decade. And I can't argue that. It's very good. I would say if you look at like any 100 favorite 100 movies list, it's in the top 5 of every, maybe even top 3, if not 1. Usually it's like Citizen Kane, and maybe The Godfather's right after that. Is the greatest movie of all time. So yeah, it's got so many accolades. Like I said, Best Picture at that time period, Best Actor for what's his name? Marlon Brando, Best Actor. Though I think Al Pacino should have won Best Actor, because I thought Al Pacino was more the main actor. I thought Marlon Brando's character was didn't have as much screen time, so I never understood that. I think Al Pacino got nominated for supporting actor, which made no sense because I thought Al Pacino is the star of this movie, and he gives such a great performance. Um, I think he should have won probably an Oscar for Best Actor for this role as well. He's so good. He's so good at being like talking very softly, but yet you like kind of get the intensity. He's like he can yell for sure and get tense, but he can talk very softly and yet still be very intense. Where you're like, okay, I'm kind of scared of this guy. He means business, kind of thing. But yeah, The Godfather. It's an interesting movie because it's a movie, of course, dealing with Italian mob family, the Corleones, uh, and the Marlon Brando's character, Don Corleone, whatever, who's the Godfather. He's the patriarch of the family and runs this business. And I'm not into mob movies. Like this is the only mob movie you probably ever see me talk about. I don't know. I'm not because they're kind of not good people, and so it's interesting when you put mob people as your main characters. Because I'm always like, oh, these are like murdering, people. Uh, they're not people to root for. But yet, I still somehow enjoy this movie. And this is a movie that I never really liked growing up. Of course, it's rated R, so I didn't watch it until I was maybe in high school or college. And I know my parents like thought this movie was terrible, so they always like kind of warned me against watching it. I think because I think it's just a little too violent, a little too dark, subject matter that I just didn't grow up on it. Even though I heard everybody talk about how good it is, so it wasn't until that time period. I think I saw it and I thought it was like maybe okay, but I wasn't like really into it. It was maybe only about 5 years ago I caught it on Netflix, and I thought, I need to rewatch The Godfather because I think they had all three of them on Netflix at one time. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch The Godfather again and see if it holds up better than what I remember. And I remember watching on Netflix and just like, man, this is a really good movie. And it kind of made me go, man, I changed my thought on The Godfather and kind of made it like, yeah, this is one of the top movies for sure. It's never my favorite necessarily, like because like I said, it doesn't have the best subject matter for me. But yeah, I have to recognize it's probably the best acting what do you call group of actors. I mean, the acting is just so good. And Marlon Brando is like one of my least favorite probably characters in the movie, but Al Pacino is so good in it. James Caan, of course, again, just passed away this last year. James Caan is really good in it. I think he gives his best performance. The younger brother is also very good. I always forget his name for some reason because he only did like 5 movies and then he died. But I don't think it's on here. But you probably know what I'm talking about. The younger brother, Frito, that actor is so good. He was, like I said, he was also in Dog Day Afternoon. He was really good in, and he was in a lot of other movies. But the performances all around are just so good. Diane Keaton, I mean, great actress of this time period. Yeah, so many great performances there. Al Pacino, definitely my favorite out of the movie. And also the dialogue is so good. It's really a movie where people are just sitting around talking, and yet I'm like totally into the movie. Because usually I like if people are just sitting around talking, I usually say, "Oh, this movie's getting kind of slow and boring." And it is a bit of a long movie, if I remember right. It's probably fairly long. I don't know if it's a 2.5 hour movie or something, but so usually I'm like, I don't like movies that are that long necessarily, but this one doesn't bother me just because I'm really into the acting and the performances and the scenes where they're sitting around table just talking and discussing things are just so exciting to watch. Or Robert Duvall is in it. I mean, another really great actor. I mean, it has so many iconic scenes. I think what really makes this one of my favorite is you begin with the horse in the bed scene. I mean, it's one of the most iconic scenes of the movie, and it really is kind of good and scary or creepy. I don't know what you want to call it. But I love all that. Of course, the whole scene with all the people coming in and asking favors of the Godfather, that's a really great sequence. Yeah, and then you get one of my favorite sequences is Al Pacino goes into the restaurant to talk to this other mobster and this corrupt policeman, and he goes to the bathroom to grab a gun that they planted and to shoot the 2 people. And that scene is so tense and so really wonderfully directed. I just love because you hear the train sound and you just like he's he's gonna do it, but he's kind of hesitant maybe because he's never killed anybody before. So, but that scene, I mean, it's very violent, but yet just really incredibly tense directed. I don't know. It's really fun scene in a sense. Love that. Like I said, I love when he comes back and he kind of takes over the business. Michael Al Pacino's character, because the storyline is really quite good. Where you have Michael, the youngest, doesn't want to be part of the business. Sonny, played by James Caan, is kind of this hothead, and he's kind of next in line, I guess. Frito, the younger brother, or he's, I guess, the middle brother. He's kind of the idiot, the family idiot, kind of screw up, who you don't want to put him in charge of anything. Also forgot the sister is also who's in Rocky. She's also very good as well. Not forgetting her name, but I'll talk about her in a second. But yeah, the whole family dynamic I really like, and I like the fact that he does not want to be kind of part of the mobster family. He wants to do something on his own, kind of thing. But when his father, they attempt to kill his father, I like the fact that he's so loyal to his family and that he will do anything to protect his father. And so I love the fact that even though he's a mobster, there's some greatness in the loyalty that he has for his family and the love that he has for his family, that he will do anything for them. And so he kind of gets forced into the leadership role, something he never wanted to do, um, but it was kind of he was destined to be the leader of this family after his dad, and he was the right leader. And so I like that idea of always like the idea of someone like being pushed into something they didn't want to do, and then they excel at it. In a way, I guess you can say that mobster excelling at being a mobster. But yeah, I really enjoy all of that whole storyline with him there. And there's so many, of course, backstabbing, murdering going on throughout the movie. Like I said, James Caan's so good as Sonny. I love when he goes crazy on the boy or the husband that's beating up his sister, and he goes crazy and just beats the living crap out of him. Love that scene. And then the very ending, I mean, what can you say? What a great ending where he's his sister's just had a baby and he's going to be the godfather, Michael is. And so they're at the Catholic church doing the christening or whatever it is that they do when you have a baby. And at the same time, he has all these people getting killed. And so you're seeing all these different different characters that are getting murdered very violently while he's doing this whole baby christening. What a great sequence! And then the very end where they shut the door on his wife, Diane Keaton, and never ask me about my business. Like I said, so many great lines. Like I love, he said something like, his father made him an offer. I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Great line. And he says, either your signature or your blood's going to be on this contract. Like that's a great line. Yeah, I love when he says, Frito's like working for this casino or something like that, and he goes there, and Frito kind of takes the sides of the casino guy, and he's like, you're my brother, I love you, but never take sides against the family. Such a great line, and he says it softly but so intensely. They're like, yeah, he means business, and it's a good line. I mean, it's true. Like, never take sides against the family. But yeah, so many, never ask me about my business at the end, he says to his wife or whatever. So good. Like I said, it's a classic for a reason. It's definitely one that's gone up in it's one that wasn't real high on me early on, but definitely one every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more. And it's not quite, I don't get emotional during the movie. So that's why it's only at, number 4 on my list. Obviously it could be higher, but it's definitely a well-made movie, well-written movie. But the movies I have above it, I think I get a little more, either it's nostalgia or just more emotionally attached to them. So that's why it's not quite number 1 for me as it is for other people. So Dutch Winston, In the Heat of the Night. Yeah, that came out, 68, maybe 67. That was the Best Picture winner. See, James Caan is one of my favorite film. Rollerball. Yeah, I hadn't seen Rollerball. I heard of that one. Just gonna pop say hi to Scott. Okay, yeah, I know. I just saw the thing. Scott, the movie critic, is starting his live stream. So I'm about ready to be done with mine. But it's always hard doing a live stream because there's always other people doing live streams. So it's hard to pick a good time. So I try to do it early enough I can get through this live stream because I know there's always going to be another live stream going on. That's going to take away my viewers, but that's fine. Hopefully, I'll be wrapping this up, and anybody that isn't watching, will watch this at a later date. Hopefully, enjoy my take on these 70s classics. Anyway, so then we're down to my top three. Yeah, when I was going through this, I was like, where do I put this movie? It's such a nostalgia movie, I guess, and it's such a huge movie in my life that I had to put number three, and that is Star Wars, the very first one, and episode 4, New Hope. Obviously, very huge. I remember definitely a huge influence on me as a kid watching Star Wars and just absolutely falling in love with the whole sci-fi genre. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and this definitely really changed the game in sci-fi. I think filmmaking, the special effects, the sound effects, the costuming, and just the storytelling is so good. And some great characters in here. It's like, what can you say? Absolutely love it as a kid. Love the whole idea of the Jedis, and I love lightsabers. I remember being a kid, first time seeing a lightsaber, and being like, what is that? Like, I love this glowing sword thing. Absolutely amazing. Been a fan of Star Wars my whole life, of course. This came out before I was born, so I kind of caught up on it later, when I was a kid. But absolutely love Star Wars since I watched it as a kid. And yeah, the very first one really set the tone of the series. It doesn't have any good lightsaber battles. That's the only thing I would say. It's number 3 of the original trilogy. I put it third, but yeah, it's still very good, and it's very good, structured very well. It's a very well paced movie, very tight script, I think, and that's what I like about it total. And you go from one scene to another. We go from being in space to being on Tatooine, where we meet Luke and Obi-Wan, and then we got the two C-3PO and R2-D2. And then we go to the bar, the canteen, where we meet Han Solo and Chewbacca, and Han Solo, probably my favorite character of all Star Wars. So good. Harrison Ford is really knocking it out of the park. Like I said, doing this and then Indiana Jones later. But yeah, so great. Harrison Ford in this role. Great comedic. I mean, he's action. He's suave. He's adventurous, and he's also very funny, I think. And then you get the Millennium Falcon, and then you get onto the Death Star, and then you have that whole sequence where they're trying to get off the Death Star, and then we get the last sequence where they're trying to destroy the Death Star with the X-Wings, and they have that big battle. Yeah, just really great how they transition from scene to scene. I think it works very well. And like I said, I think it still holds up, the special effects and the costumings and the different aliens. Of course, you love the canteen scene. We see all these different aliens, and they really went out there for that. Love Al Guinness's performance as Obi-Wan. Really great performance there. Nominated for supporting actor. This is like one of the biggest tragedies, is that Star Wars nominated for Best Picture, which sci-fi like never gets nominated, but this one was so big. Of course, it was the biggest blockbuster. I mean, it made the most money at the box office by far. Like, I know I talked to people that were around at that time. I mean, there were just lines, just huge lines to the movie theater. I know my parents went and saw it in the movie theater. And yeah, the lines were just huge. Everybody went and saw this movie. But yeah, it was nominated for I think it won 6 Oscars or something like that, but didn't win Best Picture, which to me is a tragedy. Annie Hall won Best Picture, which is a Woody Allen comedy. And I'm not a big Woody Allen fan. Maybe some other people are. But man, how do you not give Star Wars Best Picture? I mean, one of the biggest movies of all time. I think they kind of missed on that one, because I don't know, did anybody watch Annie Hall? That's not one I watched that much. Star Wars I watch all the time. But anyways, but yeah, it was just groundbreaking when it came to all the technical aspects of the movie, I think. But yeah, and the different sceneries and like that, it just really opened your mind to this whole world building of this whole universe of different planets and aliens. I mean, we got that in Star Trek, but Star Wars made it more kind of this cool adventure story. And you always love those stories where you have the character who's like destined to be great. You know, the Luke Skywalker. He's a normal kid, you know, who wants to get off his planet. He wants to do something great, and it turns out, oh yeah, you're like destined to be, you know, to save the world. You know, you always love those kind of stories. They do it all the time. Like I said, Star Wars, Harry Potter does it as well. I think about every great fantasy sci-fi franchise does that, where you have a kid that doesn't have any parents and they want to be great, and then they turn out to be destined to be the savior of the world. You know, always love those storylines, and I don't know if this is the first one to do it, but it does it very well. Um, what can you say? Darth Vader, probably the greatest villain of all time at this time, because he doesn't have a redeeming factor yet, but such a great costume look, the black helmet, the cape, just very intimidating looking, and then the voice, James Jones's voice, so good, that really great deep voice, and this the breathing, like he's on like a, you know, some kind of breathing machine, you know, just adds a lot to that character. And yeah, such a great villain. I mean, they created so many good things with this movie. That's why it's one of the greats of all time. I think everybody would agree with me. This is one of the big franchises ever, and one of the most influential movies ever. I've heard so many directors like go, "I wanted to be a movie director because of this movie," you know. So I think it did so much for the genre and for movie making in general. It really pushed what we can do with movies in the sci-fi and fantasy area. Anyway, so I love for that, and I still love the very last scene where they're, you know, the X-wings are fighting and they're going to that trench. Really great, really well uh, shot. I just love how they shoot all of that, and how he has to use his force to get the bombs into the to that one little hole, that exhaust pipe thing that will destroy the Death Star. Yeah, the whole sequence is so good, and you know, Han Solo being this guy that you can't trust, but then he can trust him. Also love Han Solo and Princess Leia. I haven't mentioned Princess Leia, so great. Another actress who passed away not too long ago. Um, their chemistry is so great. They're bickering back and forth. I love that. But yeah, I can talk forever on Star Wars. It's definitely one of the great franchises of all time. One of the great movies of this decade. You have to. It's hard. I can't imagine doing a top 10 without Star Wars in the '70s. I mean, that is the '70s. It seems like. But anyway, so I'll get on to my top two. Number two is Rocky. Dun 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 dun. See if I can do that music. Dun 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 dun. Yeah, always been a huge fan of Rocky. Fan of Sylvester Stallone. I talked this probably before. Best Picture 1976. Such a great crowd pleaser. Of all these, it feels like there's all these dark movies that are in the '70s, and Rocky was it was huge. It was like the biggest box office movie of the time. Besides winning Best Picture, Best Director, uh, and all that, it's just a really feel good movie, I guess. And I love it because you really feel good at the end. It's a very emotional movie. I get very emotional during it, and it's a very underdog story. I love the underdog aspect of it. And Rocky Balboa himself, played by Sylvester Stallone, is such a great character. I think when we did my top 10 favorite characters, he was up there as one of my favorite characters of all time. Sorry, my throat's starting to get a little dry from talking. Um, he's actually like this big, you know, oaf of a guy who has a heart of gold, and he's also a guy with really great sense of humor. And I love that about the character because he's fun throughout, and he tries to help people. Helps like a little girl at one point, and I love the whole love storyline between him and Adrian. You know, who's this? Again, I was gonna say the actress, Talia Shire. I always forget how to pronounce that, but she is very good in this role. She was in Godfather as well. Uh, but yeah, love the whole love story. She's like this, you know, very introverted, kind of, you know, person who doesn't know how to talk to men, and he's very outgoing, and he keeps trying to hit on her, trying to get her to go out with him, but she's real shy. And so I love how he brings out the shyness in her, and she kind of becomes, during the movie, she becomes less shy. And I love the whole relationship and how much in love they are, and how that blossoms anyway. So it's almost like one of my favorite romantic movies in a way, even though it's really not known for that. It's a kind of this, I don't know, it's you call it an action. I would call it drama mostly, because I think it's mostly for the drama that I like the movie. It has a sports element to it because of boxing and all that. The boxing is not my favorite part, maybe of the movie, but it's more of the um, the relationships that are in the movie, and the acting's so good. Sylvester Stallone, I wish would have won an Oscar for Best Actor. I thought he totally nailed the character. I mean, he wrote the character, and then he gets to also act it. So I mean, such a great work from Sylvester Stallone. Obviously, his best role of all. It's his first big role, and it's also his best. But I love the character because he's so vulnerable. He's a tough guy. He's a big guy. He's a boxer. Very macho, manly guy. And it's hard for those kind of guys to be, vulnerable. So I think I love it because those moments where he's vulnerable to Adrian, especially, brings out the vulnerability in him. That I love. He wants to act like, oh, what that guy said didn't bother me, and then as he's walking away, he said, "You know what I said about that guy not bothering me? I was lying." This is a great moment where he's telling Adrian, the truth is, I am afraid. Uh, Things bother me. I don't want to let on. I want to be tough, and I don't want to let those things bother me, but they do bother me. So I love those moments where he reveals himself to Adrian, and it makes you love the character even more to know he has these feelings inside. So yeah, so love that about him, and so many great what's his name? Burt Young. Yeah, Burt Young is so great I think he should have won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor because he was so great throughout the movie. You got the what's it? Yeah, crap thunder and something lightning, and let them train you, Rocky. I love his voice, that raggedy old voice that he has. Uh, just a great actor, given his one of his best performances ever. And that whole dynamic where they have not a good dynamic, but then they kind of become friends, of course, through the franchise, and it starts with this movie. Carl Brothers, so great, is the charismatic uh, boxing champion. He's kind of, you say he's a villain, but he's really not a terrible person. But he's a person he's trying to fight. In the boxing match, he's very arrogant and very good in shape. And yeah, Carl Brothers, another great performance. The brother also very good. And there's some really great moments of like him and Adrian, are fighting, and he's like, "You're supposed to be good to me," and she's like, "I owe you nothing," and she's like, she's going crazy on him. Like there's some scenes like that really make me emotional, because it's like, yeah, there's definitely some bad dynamics in the family that are coming out in the movie. But yeah, I just love the whole aspect of him. Uh, he can't do it. This guy's the best. He's just like he's a professional boxer, I guess, but he's just like a very low on the totem pole of boxers, and he's fighting the champion, one of the great champions of all time, Apollo Creed, in this movie. And this idea, like, I can't beat him, but if I can go the distance, then I feel like I had a victory. So his whole idea is just like, I just want to go toe to toe. If I can go toe to toe with the champ, it's this idea that I want to be somebody. I don't want to be a bum. And he feels like I'm just a bum. I'm a nobody. But it's like, if I can go toe to toe with the champ, I'll give some kind of what's the word? My life has meaning to it, almost, kind of thing. So I love that idea that he knows he can't beat him, but he knows if he can at least compete, that he did something special. So I love that whole aspect of the movie, of course. And the last fight scene, of course, very dramatic. Him almost beating him, and then him actually losing, which was very shocking, I think, because the good guy usually always wins. But it wasn't about winning. It was just about going toe to toe, 15 rounds, whatever, with him. That was like the success of the movie and the bout for him, and kind of making a name for himself just doing that, really. And also it's what's more important, I think, is his relationship with Adrian. I think that's what I really love about the movie, because I love that. See, at the end, the fight's over. he's he doesn't really care if he won or not. All he cares about is Adrian. He's like, Adrian, and they're trying to do an interview with him. And he's like, Adrian, that's all he thinks about. And then, yeah, the scene where she comes into the ring and she she loses her hat, and he goes, "Where's your hat?" And it's like, who cares about the hat, Rocky? But that's what's so funny about him. And then she's, "I love you, Rocky. I love you." And then they kiss, and I start like crying. I'm like, "Oh, I love Rocky and Adrian. Like, they're my favorite couple of all time." Yeah, so yeah, absolutely love the ending. I should say the musical score is great. One of the great musical scores. That dun 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 dun, man, makes you want to get up. And of course, has a great montage of him running up the steps, and running and training. So many great training montages. So many great, him punching the meat in the meat locker. I mean, so many iconic scenes. So many great lines. Just absolutely love this movie. One of the great heartfelt, you feel good movies, I think, of all time. So yeah, Rocky at number 2. So I'm down to my number 1 favorite movie of all time. My favorite movie of the 70s is actually a musical, and it's probably not one people usually think of. I feel like it's underrated, but man, I just love this movie. And it's Fiddler on the Roof. Bum 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 bum. Yeah, I could say it's my favorite musical of all time, my favorite movie of all time, really. Absolutely love the whole idea behind it. Fiddler on the Roof is this Jewish family, the patriarch being Tevye, played by Topol, just brilliantly played by him. Living in a world where there's lots of anti-Semitism. Of course, they're living close to Russia, and the Russian czars are like always suppressing the Jews. So it's a really tough time for Jewish people in this little town of Antitevka. And you have this father who has this big family. He's a poor milkman. He has 5 daughters, I think, and the 3 oldest ones are getting to marriaging age. So it comes this, he has to marry them off, and it kind of deals with, trying to keep Jewish. It's all about Jewish tradition. As most I'm not Jewish, but you can kind of get from this movie, especially, and from what I heard, tradition is like the most important thing to Jewish people. You have to keep the tradition. There's certain rules that you have to abide by, or you're not Jewish, basically, or you get ostracized by the Jewish community, I think. Anyway, so different things, you have to do things a specific way. And so it's the whole idea of trying to keep tradition is very hard at times. It's like a fiddler on a roof, because the fiddler on a roof is not very stable. And so without tradition, Jewish religion is very unstable. You have to have tradition to keep it stable. But it's hard keeping the Jewish tradition because of it seems like the world is getting modern somewhat, even though this takes place in like 1920s or something, or the 1900s, somewhere in there. There's the idea that like things are changing, the world is changing. So the idea is like, do I compromise my Jewish tradition to appease the changing world? And so I love the whole idea of not compromising your religion for the modern society or for the changing world. And I really like that idea. Of course, as a Christian, I deal with that myself. I definitely have different ideas that I have to keep from the Bible. And definitely the world is definitely different from what the Bible says. What the society thinks is right isn't what the Bible says is right. So you definitely have to deal with, do I compromise what I believe the Bible says to appease people in society, or do I, do what the Bible says and then get ostracized or get oppressed by society? It's always a hard decision to make, but ultimately I think, hopefully I try to make the right decision and abide by my religious beliefs, which I think is the right thing to do. So I love that this movie kind of deals with that kind of situation. It really deals with his 3 oldest daughters. Are kind of the main plot point, I guess, is they're getting to marriage age, and marriage in the society is there's a matchmaker, and the matchmaker finds a husband for the girls, and then presents them to the father, and the father ultimately makes everything is nobody just marries for love. Everybody marries. It's I'm now forgetting the name of the word. You kind of get told who you're going to get married to. You don't get to choose as a girl. in this society. Arranged marriage. Everything's arranged, and the father gets to decide who the daughter marries. And so there's this whole idea of like, the father tries to find a good husband for his daughters, of course, because he loves his daughters. But what's important is to make a marriage that's a good match. That you want your daughters to marry someone that's fairly wealthy, that's good for your family, or you marry someone to somebody that will help your business, maybe all kinds of things like that you think about. It's almost it's not about romance or love. It's more of like what's good for business, I guess, or what's a good match for the family in whole. So it's kind of an interesting idea. While the daughters want to marry for love, they don't want to just marry anybody. And so I like the whole idea behind them, like being afraid of who their father's going to pick for them, and that they really want to fall in love with somebody, have romance, which is like unheard of. So I love the whole plot point of that. And you get from the oldest daughter, she has there's a guy, the poor tailor, who Mazatov, I think his name is, Matzel, whatever, the poor tailor, who they've been friends since they were kids, and they've been in love for a long time. They pledge themselves to each other, and this idea that she wants to marry him because she loves him. Yet there's this other guy who's wealthier that wants to marry her, and the father wants her to marry the more wealthy guy. But then he kind of finds out he ultimately wants his daughter to be happy. So I love that he has to make the decision: do I do what I think is best for my daughter, or do I do what my daughter will make my daughter happy? Do I go against tradition and let my daughter marry because she's in love, which is like against tradition? And ultimately, he goes with he lets his daughter marry the guy that she loves because he wants her happiness. And this idea of like, I can bend tradition a little bit to appease my daughter. But then the question is, how far can you bend tradition before you go too far? And as he says, if I bend too far, I'll break. He says at one point, he has a line that he cannot cross as a Jewish person, or he feels like he loses his, religion, I guess. And that's the most important thing in his life is his Jewish religion. So it's a very interesting, I think, conflict. And that's why I love the movie so much, is this conflict of compromising your religious beliefs with what you think will make your people happy, and where do you draw that line, kind of thing. I think that's what I love about it. Anyways, but then you get to the other daughters, and one daughter wants to marry outside the faith, wants to marry a non-Jewish person, and at that point he says, no, I can't go, that's too far. I can't bend my Jewish tradition far enough to let you do that. That's going against what I can allow. And then there's a heartbreaking scene where he has to basically disavow his daughter, and basically says, I don't have, and I'm forgetting the name of the daughter, but the third daughter, he has to basically say she's not part of the family anymore. She's not his daughter anymore. A very sad scene. Probably my favorite scene in the whole movie because it's so heartbreaking, where he has to tell his daughter, no, you're not part of the family anymore because you married outside the family. And then he sings this whole song about how sad he is that his daughter, did this, and that he had to, kick her out of the family, basically. Havila. And there's a song about, little Havila. And oh man, such a heartbreaking scene. It makes me cry every time I watch it. Him having to disavow his daughter because of religious beliefs, But yet I respect him for. I would never want to, kick out a family member because of religion, but I respect him for the fact that he will not compromise his religion, which I kind of respect him for that in a sense. So that's what I like about the character so much. He's a great character. He's very. He's poor, but he's very. He wants what's best for his family, but he wants to keep to tradition. He's very serious at times, but he's also very funny. I just absolutely love the character Tevye. It's one of my favorite. And Topol, so good. The actor Topol, who is a Jewish actor from Israel, who does the character so well. And he really makes that character his own. I mean, nobody does as good as he has. Fill the Roof has been a big hit on like Broadway and in London. and he's done that character like so many times on stage. I mean, he's Tavio, for sure. But yeah, so many great moments of either heartbreak, or it's a movie that makes me cry, makes me laugh. It's got some good romantic storylines, in fact, in the movie that make me I really enjoy. So it's kind of a roller coaster movie of emotions for me. I get a lot of different emotions. I mean, you get anger. There's definitely some angry scenes in there because they're being suppressed because they're their Jewish faith or their race. So there's all kinds of feelings throughout the movie. It's a very long movie. And I think people probably don't care about it because of how long it is. But man, I don't mind the length. It's because it's over 3 hours, I think, movie. But man, it's so good throughout. Like I said, the music's so good. Beginning with the beginning song of Tradition, Tradition, bum 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 bum. And also, there's of course, all this fiddle work throughout the movie. Of course, the violin work is absolutely beautiful. Um, Sunrise, Sunset, very beautiful song where the first two are getting married. Um, Somewhat comical song with him singing to his wife about "Do you love me?" Because they've been married for like 30 years, but they never tell each other they love each other. But they kind of talk about, "Do we love each other?" And they do, and so it's got some comedy in it. Very well done. Um, like I said, Little Havila, just heartbreaking song and scene. Another scene where the second daughter has to go off to Russia because her husband has been arrested in Siberia, and so she has to travel to Siberia and leave her home. And it's a very heartbreaking scene of the father like, you're leaving home, and she, why would you leave home, and she says, and she sings a song about leaving the home I love. Oh, such a heartbreak. Another song that I cry when I watch it because it's so heartbreaking. She doesn't want to leave her family, but she does because her husband's, or I think it's her boyfriend who's going to be her husband, is off in Siberia. And so she's going to travel for him. Even though she doesn't want to leave, she has to leave because she loves him. Such a great scene. Like I said, so wonderfully acted. It was nominated for Best Picture. I think it should have won. Uh, it came out in 1971. Lost against I forget the name of the movie. The Gene Hackman movie that won that year, but it should have won that. Topol, I think, should have won Best Actor. He gives such a great performance. Like I said, he's very serious at times, but very comedic at times. And the cameras, he has such great facial expression, especially sadness. I feel like there's these scenes where he's sad, and the camera just closes up on his eyes because his eyes are so good. They look so sad, during the sad moments. And so I think the camera work is so good at closing up on his eyes during certain scenes. But amazingly directed. One of my favorite director, Norman Jewison, directed the movie. Uh, Really great director who did In the Heat of the Night, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, some of his big ones at the time. Definitely my top one of his. But yeah, so yeah, great musical. Won the Oscar for cinematography. Very well shot. Won best musical score for, I think, a musical, which is John Williams. It was John Williams like first. I think I want to say his first, one of his first musical scores that won an Oscar. So a great John Williams score here throughout. So I mean, I can't say enough. It's uh, wonderful, wonderful musical. The music is so good. The performance is so good. Shot so wonderfully, and such a great storyline. I just absolutely love the story throughout, and the conflict is so good. And uh, yeah, you really feel for the characters throughout the whole movie. I get very emotional watching it. So I always, when I get emotional, that means it's a good movie. If it can get to me, get to the heart of me like that, anyway. So yeah, I can't say enough. Just love At Fiddler on the Roof. Probably my favorite movie of all time. Definitely favorite musical, and it's my number one favorite movie of the 1970s. So that ends my top 10 list here, hour and 45 minutes. I hope everybody watching this enjoy what I have to say. Feel free to comment what your favorite movies of the 1970s, as you've had already. I'd love to read the comments, see what other people think. Anyway, so yeah. So I hope everybody has a good weekend, as it's Friday today. So just have a good weekend, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.